We see the headlines every single day. Melting ice caps, rising seas, crazy weather. We think we get the story. But what if the biggest threat from climate change isn't what we're all focused on? What if it's something quieter and a whole lot more dangerous?
So, let's dig into this quote, because the real story here isn't just about a warming planet. It's about how that warming is like an accelerant, literally pouring gasoline on all the other environmental fires we've already started.
Okay, so what's the big twist? Well, it's this. Think of climate change kind of like a predator. It doesn't just attack healthy ecosystems. No, it's smarter than that. It seeks out the weak spots, finds the existing cracks in the system, and just rips them wide open.
And this right here is a total game changer. It means we're not dealing with a simple checklist of separate environmental problems anymore. We're dealing with a massive chemical reaction. And climate change is the catalyst that's making the whole thing, well, explode.
So how does this chain reaction actually work? Well, scientists have a really powerful name for it. They call it the threat-to-multiplier effect. Let's pop the hood and see what's really going on.
And here's the key thing to get. Climate change isn't really creating brand new problems out of thin air. Instead, it's taking all the existing poisons in our ecosystems and mixing them up into something way more toxic, what our source material calls a deadly anthropogenic cocktail.
And here are those other ingredients. Even before climate change kicked into high gear, our ecosystems were already struggling. They were dealing with stuff like habitat fragmentation, where we chop up forests and wildlands into these tiny, disconnected islands. They were also fighting off invasive species, pollution, and overharvesting. So let's see what happens when you add the most volatile ingredient of all into that mix.
All right, let's zoom in on one of the absolute most lethal combinations out there. What happens when a warming world crashes head-on into a fragmented one? This is where the extinction crisis really goes into overdrive.
This is the absolute heart of the problem. As the planet heats up, plants and animals are in a desperate race for their lives, trying to get to cooler climates. But here's the thing. In our modern world, their escape routes are almost all blocked. So what's standing in their way?
Just look at this slide. On the left, you've got a connected landscape, basically an open highway for any species on the move. And on the right, that's our reality. It's a maze of roads, cities, and farms. And these aren't just obstacles. They are, for all intents and purposes, prison walls.
This really nails the two-part crisis we're talking about. First, climate change sets the house on fire. Then, our fragmented world comes along and locks all the doors. So you have species literally trapped inside a burning building with no way out. This phrase from the source material is just chilling. It's not a quick death. It's what they call a slow ecological imprisonment. Basically a death by 1,000 cuts.
Okay, now let's look at another one of these deadly synergies, but this one is special because the threats actually feed on each other. We're talking about the vicious cycle between climate change and invasive species.
So first up, climate change is basically rolling out the red carpet for invasive species. As temperatures rise, these super adaptable invaders just march into new territories, and frankly, the native species often don't stand a chance.
But wait, it doesn't stop there. As these invaders take over, they act like a disease, weakening the entire ecosystem. They steal water, they change the soil, and they make the whole area way more vulnerable to the next big climate shock, whether that's a drought or a flood.
And what you get is this: a death spiral. Climate change empowers the invaders. The invaders then cripple the ecosystem. And a crippled ecosystem has absolutely no defense against the next climate blow. It is a one-way ticket to ecological collapse. And you see this pattern everywhere you look. Warmer water makes pollution more toxic. Warmer air helps spread disease. Overfished oceans just can't bounce back from the heat. It's this tangled web of crises, and every single thread is connected to all the others. So, if all the problems are connected, then our solutions have to be too. And this isn't just some new idea. It's a whole new rule book for how we do conservation in the 21st century.
The old way of doing things was basically to play whack-a-mole. Set up a park over here, ban a pesticide over there. But that's like trying to patch a sinking boat one leak at a time. The new playbook says no, we need a total overhaul. We need a systemic approach for a systemic crisis.
This, right here, is probably the single most important takeaway. We just can't afford to be specialists anymore. A climate plan that ignores how we use our land, it's incomplete. A biodiversity plan that ignores pollution, that's like a car with no wheels. It is just not going anywhere.
And this is what that new approach actually looks like: building wildlife corridors to heal this fragmented landscapes, getting invasive species under control to give native species a fighting chance, cutting pollution. Listen, this stuff isn't just conservation anymore. This is climate action. This is how we build a stronger, more resilient world that can actually absorb the shocks we know are coming.
This quote really is the bottom line. By easing up on all these other pressures, we're not just helping nature survive, we're actually helping it fight back. We're giving it the tools it needs to win.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. In places like India, where you have tigers and tech hubs basically sharing the same landscape, this integrated approach isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline.
So that leaves us with a pretty big question. In this tangled web of threats, where do we even start? If you could pull on just one thread to begin unraveling this whole crisis and strengthening the entire system, which one would you pick? That's the question we all have to answer now.